Zhao stopped to take attendance, turning around to ensure no one was left behind. However, he didn't spot Lu Sheng among the students. Did Lu Sheng not keep up, he wondered. At that moment, a panting senior student, while catching his breath, tells Zhao that Lu Sheng has already far outpaced them. Zhao looked towards the continuous stone steps stretching upwards, suddenly finding himself at a loss for words. Meanwhile, on the deserted mountain path, two figures were rapidly climbing the steps, two youngsters in martial arts attire. The senior brother, looking at the girl, smiled and suggested taking a rest here before continuing. The girl, with her hair in a ponytail, with her face slightly flushed and sweat on her forehead, tells him that she still had the energy to sprint upwards. The senior brother explained with a smile that it was the girl's first time at St. Mountain, and she was unfamiliar with some rules, which he could take this time to explain. The girl's interest was piqued. As it turns out, they had already reached a decently high level, now surrounded by vast clouds and fog, with the stone steps steeply ascending. However, there were still a few more steps ahead of them. These steps are also known as the 5 steps. Martial artists refer to these 5 stone steps as the stairway to heaven. The senior brother was about to go on a lengthy history lesson about how 200 years ago, the first person in their nation achieved the 9th level martial saint on these very steps, but was interrupted by the impatient girl. Clearly, she had heard these tales countless times before, and was only interested in the essentials, playfully accusing her senior brother of being overly drippy. Hearing this, the senior brother simply scratched the back of his head and laughed heartily, all the while saying he had hoped to give the girl a chance to recover more energy, but didn't expect to be teased for it. Anyway, he continued, but this time focused on the key points. As it turned out, the first martial saint had cultivated here, refining his body with heavenly fire and thunder, achieving a profound connection with the heavens and earth, and eventually becoming a martial saint. This made the Saint Mountain retain the aura of his martial will. Any martial artist under 30 who came here, with decent talent, blood energy, and alongside with some luck to walk the stairway to heaven, could potentially trigger the residual martial will, while creating a rare and spectacular phenomenon. The girl, curious, wondered what kind of phenomenon. Just as the senior brother was considering how to describe it, they were interrupted by a sound coming from the distance. Suddenly, a powerful roar from the mountain summit pierced the sky, causing the surrounding clouds to swirl and roll like tidal waves under the influence of this unspoken force. The senior brother quickly explained that this was what he was trying to describe, speculating that only a person with great grandmaster potential could trigger such a phenomenon. Seconds later, the clouds surged, forming waves that revealed 3 giant white whales roaming in the sky. The girl was left dumbfounded. The senior brother remarked that they might have just witnessed history. Such phenomena indicated that there were at least 3 individuals atop the mountain with the potential to become martial saints. The girl turned to him, eyes wide with disbelief, just to hear him elaborate that potential did not guarantee success, but indicated greater opportunity, enough to make any martial artist envious. Realizing this, the girl's excitement surged, and she prepared to keep climbing, jokingly saying that maybe she too could cause such a phenomenon. She then started stretching, ready for the final sprint, just as she readied to ascend. Suddenly, a figure darted past them at such speed that neither of them could keep up. So fast that the two could not catch a glimpse of the person's appearance. Suddenly, the clouds at the mountain summit surged outward. A sound resembling a dragon's roar soared into the sky. Suddenly, a massive golden dragon appeared, leaving the two of them in utter shock. Their minds went completely blank. The senior brother trembled, overwhelmed by the sight of the ancient legend about the golden dragon that was said to devour everything. Meanwhile, Lu Sheng had been casually ascending the mountain. Initially, he treated himself like he was jogging, but gradually, the higher he climbed, there was an indescribable sensation began to emerge from his body. At this moment, it felt as if he was the only one left in the entire world. Then, the nature's breathing technique began to flow spontaneously. Although he hadn't done anything, it seemed as if all of his techniques were being guided by something, pulling him upwards toward the summit. It was then that Lu Sheng noticed the giant dragon in the sky, clutching 2 whales in its claws and another in its mouth. In the next moment, the dragon tore the 3 whales apart, confused about what was happening, while mistaking them for some kind of welcoming ceremony on the mountain. Suddenly, Lu Sheng stopped in his tracks as the giant dragon floated before him. Then, with a mighty roar from the dragon's mouth, causing Lu Sheng to frown, he instantly recognized that the dragon was challenging his martial will. Not long after, many people gathered at the summit. Lu Sheng was one of them, with the phantom of the golden dragon still accompanying him. The noisy platform all of a sudden quieted down, with everyone's gaze fixated on Lu Sheng, or perhaps on the golden dragon above him, hardly believing they were seeing a dragon phenomenon. The 3 prodigies who had summoned the white whales are nothing compared to this. Lu Sheng briefly scanned the crowd on the platform before heading towards an empty spot, with the dragon continuing to circle above him. An elder man, continuously stroking his beard, was also surprised to see the phenomenon that only belonged in the legends for the first time in his many years of participating in this competition. He quickly pointed at Lu Sheng, instructing the students to find out who he was. At the same time, there was much speculation among the crowd about Lu Sheng. Some wondered if Lu Sheng was a martial saint already. Upon closer inspection, they realized he was about their age, or perhaps even younger, and to their surprise, he wore the uniform of the 7th Divine Martial University. Hearing the whispers, Lu Sheng paused and glanced at them, causing a few to sweat profusely until he walked away, allowing them to resume their discussion. Some students from the other Divine Martial University recognized Lu Sheng, however. Some of the seniors didn't have the chance to witness Lu Sheng breaking the record in all 7 Divine Martial Towers. The crowd buzzed with discussions, noting that even martial saints in their youth had only managed to summon white whales. Does this mean that Lu Sheng was destined to surpass that of a martial saint? Listening to the disciples' discussion and the stories of Lu Sheng, the elder couldn't hold his admiration towards the youngster. He then remembered that this kid must have been the disciple that the Tan martial saint took notice of. Hearing this, all of the disciples' gaze towards Lu Sheng grows more serious. One slightly fat disciple couldn't help but gulp nervously, pondering if the white whale phenomenon indicated a future martial saint. Then what could the golden dragon suggest about Lu Sheng's potential to surpass the 9th level martial saint status? However, others too heard these discussions surrounding Lu Sheng, unable to fathom the possibility of someone surpassing a martial saint. What kind of realm would that be? The leading elder chuckled, commanding the disciples' attention. Playing with 2 heavy iron beads in his hands, he calmed everyone down and slowly explained, a single degree cooler, and water turns to ice. A degree warmer, it becomes vapor. Sometimes what seems like a world of difference might not always be the case. What he was trying to say was although Lu Sheng was very talented, it's not as exaggerated as everyone might have thought. He continued, explaining that the phenomena at St. Mountain were not specifically meant to test martial arts talent. It could be that Lu Sheng's martial will was more in tune with that of a martial saint from 200 years ago, allowing him to trigger a stronger phenomenon. Or perhaps the energies had already been drawn out by others, and he was simply in the right place at the right time. Then informed his disciples that there couldn't be a being stronger than a martial saint, as martial saints are the pinnacle of this world. The old man was clearly not aware of what our boy was capable of. He had no idea that Lu Sheng could easily knock him back to the base of the mountain with a single punch. Anyway, despite his words, it was clear that his explanation had convinced many, as they also regarded martial saints as the ultimate peak. The elder was satisfied with the reactions, though his face still showed admiration. After all, Lu Sheng's displayed aura and strength were indeed far beyond anyone his age. Whether he could become a martial saint was still uncertain, let alone surpassing one. The girl in the back thought to herself, looking towards the group from the Jidao Martial School. It seemed like they were about to have a rough time. Climbing the mountain was merely the first test for the martial artists. Once everyone had reached the summit, there was a building designed for the martial artists to rest. Inside one of the rooms, surrounded by a group of young people dressed in the uniforms of the Jidao Martial School, stood a bald man with hands behind his back, who snorted coldly and slammed his fist onto the table. He was deeply disappointed in his disciples, unable to believe that they were frightened by a minor phenomenon triggered by a boy named Lu Sheng. If Lu Sheng were here, he would recognize the man as the father of Lian Ye, the target's father assigned to him by the martial saint. Anyway, To him, Lu Sheng was not even a grandmaster, merely a young prodigy. Everyone here in this room was the core elites of the young generation from their martial school, all personally guided by a martial saint from a young age. Scared of a mere student from the 7th Divine Martial University was such an embarrassment. He berated the group, continuously pounding the table. Not long after, a young disciple stepped forward, while playing with his hair, agreeing with the man's words, while added that Lu Sheng was not yet a grandmaster, and his talent was a matter for the future. The person was one of the twin stars, and shortly after the other twin star also stepped forward, although quite jealous of the phenomenon today, but stubbornly insisting that martial prowess was not about flashy shows. He then clenched his fist in the air, while cracking his joins. He coldly stated that if Lu Sheng stood before him, he would crush him with one hand. Yeah, sure bud, you can try though, not going to end up pretty for you. The bald man laughed heartily, much more satisfied. He then patted both on the shoulders. He thought of something that would make this more entertaining. He then tells the twin stars that during the tournament, whoever encountered Lu Sheng first could just kill him on the spot. He tells them that there's no need to worry about the 7 divine martial universities, saying he will handle it for them. The twin stars nodded, a cold light flickering in their eyes. Exchanging glances, all three let out a chilling laugh. On the other side, the Transcend Martial School, which just like the Jidao Martial School, was founded by a martial saint as well. A girl was staring at her phone on the couch. Turned out that she was looking at a photo of Lu Sheng she had secretly taken. Perhaps another fangirl? We will see. However, she looked quite concerned, and her senior brother quickly came over, noticing her interest in Lu Sheng. He reassured her that Lu Sheng was yet a grandmaster, and certainly no match for her. He tells the girl that her targets were the Jidao twin stars, who had already had a glimpse of Grandmaster's will 2 years ago, and should have been around grandmaster level by now. The girl nodded, but her eyes kept drifting back to her phone. Seeing her like this, her senior brother continued to comfort her. However, her focus remained on Lu Sheng's photo. Turned out, she had a special talent from birth, being able to see spirits as a child. When she saw Lu Sheng reaching the summit, she happened to notice something that no one else could see, no other than the dense black mists trailing behind him. It was as if massive shadows were spreading out from him, gradually moving towards the sky above Saint Mountain. She couldn't understand what those black mists were, but felt incredibly frightened by them. Could these be her illusions? She wondered. Meanwhile, in the main lobby, many people were discussing Lu Sheng. Learning about his feat of breaking 7 divine martial towers and his nickname the Demon King immediately became a topic of interest among youngsters. Coupled with today's Golden Dragon phenomenon, everyone already regarded him as an idol. Some even declared that Lu Sheng was bound to win the entire competition. Not far from them, a tall student, remembering when Lu Sheng had come to challenge their divine martial tower, was relieved he hadn't rashly confronted Lu Sheng, as he would have surely got his ass kicked. Meanwhile, a youth in a hoodie next to him shook his head, remembering the time when he tried to defend the tower. His best efforts had failed miserably. He commented that only those who had fought Lu Sheng could understand how terrifying he was. Suddenly, a large hand patted his shoulder, advising him not to belittle himself. The elderly man was the principal of the 4th Divine Martial University. Despite his gray hair, he had a robust physique. He earnestly tells the young man to focus on his own martial path. Recognizing the elder, the young man bowed in respect. The principal smiled, reminding them that all 7 divine martial universities were one entity, and there was no need to see Lu Sheng as an opponent. The two students exchanged glances and then smiled together. The principal was right. With Lu Sheng participating, this competition would indeed be very interesting. The principal smiled, his hands clasped behind him as he stood up straight. Looking towards the 7th Divine Martial University, he expressed his belief that this year was their best chance to win it all. Looking towards Lu Sheng, he seemed eager to see what the future held for him. While everyone was excited, Vice Principal Zhao seemed to have a rough day. He looked very concerned. His gaze lingered on Lu Sheng, wanting to say something, but then he held it back. The more astonishing Lu Sheng's talent, the more he regretted it. He wondered if Lu Sheng did not understand all his hints, or if was he pretending not to understand. As long as Lu Sheng kills Lian Ye and finishes the test, regardless of how the Jidao Martial School reacts, the Martial Saint will certainly protect him. Why isn't Lu Sheng listening to him? Why is he choosing the wrong path? However, Lu Sheng was completely unaware of Vice Principal Zhao's thoughts. He was just feeling the power that had entered his body when he reached the summit, which not only significantly increased his strength, but also added a whale pattern to his martial will. Lu Sheng himself hadn't expected to gain so much from a simple climb. While in his room, Lu Sheng tried to harness the power of the whale pattern. He could feel the strength it bestowed upon him as if he could lift a mountain. Perhaps combined with his 25 times stellar force, he wondered where his limits lay. Could he one-punch a great grandmaster? Suddenly he felt a killing intent emerge behind him. Lu Sheng shifts his gaze, scanning the room. His eyes paused briefly upon seeing the group at Jidao Martial School. One person caught his interest. It was a bald man standing at the back. He had seen this man many times through photos, but this was the first time seeing him in real person. Their eyes met. The bald man was like a venomous snake locking onto its prey. Lu Sheng felt the man's blood energy level, unmistakably that of an 8th level grandmaster. Lu Sheng estimated his chances of winning against this man were currently only about 30%. However, should he break through to the grandmaster level right now, he figured it would take less than 20 seconds to kick his ass. Feeling the gazes of many others around him, he was acutely aware that he had become a target for many, yet he was not concerned in the slightest. Should anyone seek trouble with him, he doesn't mind crushing every single one of them.
Chapter 1. The ill-fated story of the main character AG begins 10 years after the end of the world. Chaos and devastation reigns around. In the midst of this confusion, the only thing missing was the attack of a demon of an incomprehensible nature and unknown power. Alas, the encounter with the terrible creature was rapidly approaching. In a matter of seconds, 2 pairs of furious eyes of the monster had already begun to greedily devour the man in a desire to tear apart the prey, and the open mouth of a wild black cat began to tear a backpack full of all sorts of good. By the way, very necessary. In an unsuccessful attempt to repel the demon's attack, the man decides to run. Only a terrible thing happens. His leg is abruptly overtaken and grabbed by the head of a poisonous snake, which turned out to be nothing more than the tail of a monster. The venomous sting penetrates deeply into the body of the young man. He falls wounded and broken, and the beast just grunts in response and spits out the stick that he was trying to defend himself with. The demon does not notice that a pointed knife that was attached to his weapon falls next to the enemy. For the man, it seemed that the situation was hopeless, but the place where the dagger fell was very close. Maybe this is a chance for salvation. Suddenly, he felt a desire to take revenge on the beast at the first opportunity. The attempt to reach the knife was unsuccessful. The monster got ahead of the young man and covered the weapon with its huge paw. The man did not even realize that this fight foreshadowed him. In an instant, the figure of a she-devil girl appeared in front of him, who at first could not even believe in her luck when faced with a being of human nature. She was absolutely delighted that finally she had the opportunity to feel a person touch the body